Hi, I'm Susan Russell with Mold Dog Knows, and welcome to our podcast, All Mold Matters. I'm here with Mike McNatt, an IEP, which is an indoor environmental professional. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I know there's a lot that we can talk about to really dig deep and get into just kind of the world of mold. So many people are really unaware of how bad it is for the body, if we just want to put it that way. Tell me a little bit, first of all, what you do as an indoor environmental professional.
Well, it's great to be here, Susan. I'm glad y'all, certainly appreciate y'all asking me on. An indoor environmental professional is, and actually we tag the words on medically sound indoor environmental professional in some case, but mainly leave it IEP or indoor environmental professional for short. We are professionals that typically started out as mold assessment consultants, but then found a calling or a drive or just a passion for working with people who are sensitized to mold. So these are people who have been either long-term low-dose exposed, so it can sneak up on you over years, or sometimes they have a chronic acute exposure in one time. But from there, you're right, it can have a number of impacts to the human system and really throw off the immune function reaction and really impact people's lives in ways that aren't just medical, but also are social and lifestyle and just their ability to enjoy life, everything.
It can destroy your life. And I think you and I have talked about this before, but that I personally have walked through this and tapping my mic. That's not a good thing. But yes, it can be gut-wrenching. It really is.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it starts off with a very sad story that already sets up their psychology and their mentality in a position that is against them healing and recovering. And that is, they're not feeling right. And they start telling people there's something wrong. So they start off by going to general practitioners. And the general practitioner says, I can't find anything wrong with you. So then they go to allergists and then to endocrinologists and then to infectious disease specialists and so on and so forth. And they eventually end up in front of a psychiatrist or psychologist because everyone's telling them there's not really anything wrong with you. And just the fact that they're not even believed is so demoralizing and so harmful to their emotional state that their body has trouble after that many times coming out of that state so that it can rest, relax, and heal.
Well, it causes PTSD. And it actually does. And that, I'm thinking of one thing. You have several videos on your website that are phenomenal. But one of them that, talking about people not believing you, it's often the women. It's more often than not the women and not the husbands when you go in. And I assume you're having to work with expectations and just try to help them understand that this is real.
And the good news is we now have a better understanding of why women are 3 to 4 times more likely to have indoor environmental exposure issues and autoimmune disorders. And basically 3 of them are lifestyle reasons. So women on average, and let's make it clear, we're not subscribing to or supporting gender role definitions, but in reality, statistically in the United States, women spend more time in the home than men do. Second reason is women spend more time with cooking, cleaning, and other activities that exposes them to chemicals like cleaning chemicals and toxins that are produced when we cook. And keep in mind, mold exposure, mold is a smoking gun issue. It's a catalyst to people not feeling well. But really, we live in a toxic environment. We call it the toxic soup or the toxic load that we're being exposed to. So all of these things contribute. Women also use more personal care products. So just a word out to the men there. I think we could all probably do a little better in that department for the ladies.
I help.
And then finally, the fourth primary reason has nothing to do with decisions in life. It's that women have estrogen and proestrogen and men have testosterone. So because women develop children, they get pregnant, and they need to be there to help raise that child. Women have a little turbocharger on their immune systems. Their immune systems are actually stronger. And part of the problem with mold exposure and becoming sensitized is actually the immune system's response to the mold and not the mold itself.
Yeah, and that actually is a topic we're going to get into later on in another episode, talking to Dr. Rodney Russell, my husband, who deals a lot with mold illness. I helped him go down that rabbit trail,
So that's a foreshadowing that I'm going to get to do this again? Maybe. Let's see how this goes.
Let's get into what your day is like when you're going to see a customer. Tell me about the typical customer that's reached out to you. What are they saying to you? Because I know people,
right?
It takes them a while. Like you said, they're seeing, the allergist, the infectious disease specialist. I mean, it takes a while to finally have someone say to them that this might be mold exposure.
Well, I tell you, the first thing I'll start out with is that my clients are exceptional. They're exceptional in so many ways. They are exceptionally sensitized to mold. Many times they are exceptionally educated on the topic because when they go to the doctors, they're not getting information from the traditional practitioners because, unfortunately, mold isn't addressed in medical school and training. It's kind of developed into a field of its own that we call environmental or functional medicine. And I know Dr. Rodney practices functional medicine. Yeah. So it's a fairly new field that started developing maybe 20, 25 years ago. But we are learning so much in how to treat the conditions that can develop from our environment. We are a product of our environment. So the people I deal with are exceptionally informed on the topic, which is why your average indoor environmental professional has to know everything and beyond what a mold assessor knows. Plus, we have to know a little bit about how the mold and the environment interacts with the human system, our immune function. We're by no means practitioners, and every good indoor environmental professional will make sure to stay in their lane. So you'll see us saying things like, people will say, is it safe to be here? Well, that's a medical question, and we always refer them back to their practitioners. If you think your environment is affecting your health or you're having medical symptoms, see a qualified functional or environmental practitioner. That is paramount.
I want to get into what you actually do. So talk to me about when you set foot in a house, or I know you also do a 30-minute consult prior.
Right.
What are the questions? What are some of the things that you're asking them? What are you discerning?
So I tell people that I'm although I'm not a practitioner, I kind of envision myself being the general practitioner for the home. Yes. That the medical practitioner treats the body, the physiology. We treat the environment that physiology lives in because we are a product of our environment. Yes. So the first thing I do is I use an analogy of going to a doctor visit as how I do my job. A good indoor environmental professional is going to take the first 20 minutes onboarding the customer saying, when did it start? How long have you experienced this? What have you tried? How long have you lived in this environment? Because sometimes exposure can be from a previous home or residence. So we get all of that background information. And I tell people all the time, my number one tool when I do an indoor environmental investigation, believe it or not, it's not my meters and it's not the lab tests, it's my client. They know how they feel better than anyone. And oftentimes I show up at an assessment and I'll get all the information from them, and then I ask them to take me to the places where they suspect. And I love to use the opening that, let's pretend you already know where the mold is, show me.
Yes.
And many times they don't even think that they know where the mold is, but as soon as I asked that question, they said, oh, if I knew where it was, it's right there.
Great. That's a great idea, Mike. And, I'm going to throw in here, the way we met is through our company, Mold Dog Knows.
Yes.
You do require quite often that you have our dog, one of our handler teams, come out and do a pre-assessment to pinpoint. Why do you use a mold dog?
It's and I will tell you, Susan, to be completely transparent, I was very skeptical of the mold dog. Now, I've got a very varied background, a very diverse background. I've worked on 2 PhDs in psychology and have a master's degree. So I'm used to being a scholar practitioner, and I approach my business that way. I will not recommend anything to my clients just due to the delicate nature of their health and their condition that I have not extremely well vetted myself. So when the mold dog first started showing up on the scene, I said, okay, I've got to dig in and find out a lot more about this pooch. Also needed to find out whether or not I was going to be replaced by a dog.
Exactly.
But I will tell you, we have a lot in common. I am housebroken and I've had my vaccinations and I don't bite. And additionally, though, the advantage I have over the dog is I have thumbs, so I can write a report. The dog doesn't know how to read or write.
Yes, exactly.
So that's a definite advantage. But what I like to do is walk through with the customer and them show me where to go. And as I was doing that with even very sensitized customers, sometimes we would inspect the home repeatedly and not be able to pinpoint the problem. As much as I try to be the best as I can be at finding mold and microbial growth and other indoor environmental hazards, I still can't see through building materials. And sometimes the hardest homes to assess are investment homes, past rental homes, homes where somebody has gone in and they've cleaned up the crime scene.
Exactly.
So there's no evidence. So I have developed, I'll just do a quick plug for my nonprofit, healthyhome.help, where I am developing frameworks for people who can't afford and need some help themselves. But in that framework, there is a 3-step process that I call the mold assessment trifecta. And if a person can afford the process, it is the best process for getting your home assessed. First is to do a test called a qPCR test. Some people have heard of it as a ERMI or HERTSMI. You're familiar?
Yeah.
You simply take a dust test, you send it to the lab, a Swiffer test, and it's probably one of the best indicators of the overall health of the home, but the worst at telling you where the mold is. So that's step one, answer the question, do I have a mold problem or not? And that test is a good way to say yes or no. Right after that, get on the phone with Mold Dog Knows and get a dog schedule, because that is the best tool for pinpointing suspect areas aside from the occupant. So if they say, hey, I didn't even really know I have a mold problem, but the dust test says I do, I have no idea where it could be, because this is a rental home, or this was a rental home, or it was a flip home. The mold dog will pinpoint areas. And I tell my clients all the time, that dog's sense of smell is upwards of 100,000 times more sensitive than a human's.
Yes.
Now, if that dog can't smell mold at 100,000 times better than my sense of smell, then there's likely not going to be a mold problem.
So it's been a helpful tool for you to pinpoint and not just kind of, I've heard stories, and this actually happened to us, where we had a professional mold inspector come in and they're like, your house is fine. You know, they gave the clearance. I hear this over and over again, and then also with many patients. But the dog is able to pinpoint. I mean, we literally put tape on the spots, and you can then effectively go directly to where the dog is indicating, rather than, I've heard stories where people are tearing down this wall and tearing down that wall, and they can never find it. And then the house is like completely torn apart.
Well, and so, yeah, you're exactly right. When a mold assessor goes in, a lot of them only know what they've been taught by the people that taught them, who only know what they were taught by the people who taught them. And so the question is, how much do they dig into primary source literature and research, and what are their qualifications? Because many mold assessors will go in and set up a pump in the middle of a room, and they'll start the pump, and then they'll walk around shining their flashlight looking for the mold. And the problem with that whole model is that gravity, I believe in gravity very much. I think Sir Isaac Newton had it right, Susan, especially now. I just turned 57. I believe in gravity more than ever. Okay, it's every year that goes by, I believe in it more and more. Well, if gravity affects me, it affects everything with mass. And mold particles are physical particles. They have mass. So the research shows that within 90 minutes of a room that's completely still, would you believe that upwards of 90% of the particles can settle to the ground?
Yep.
They're all down below. So if I set up a pump 4 feet off the ground, and the question would be, well, Mike, why are they setting the pump 4 feet off the ground? Well, look at where we're breathing right now.
Yeah.
And that's what they will tell you. We're trying to breathe at the average respiration height of an occupant, which for adults is about 4 feet. But and the saddest thing is, some of the most at-risk populations in a home are those where their average breathing height is close to the floor.
The little ones.
Newborns, infants, and toddlers.
And they're agitating it too, so they are stirring it up. So we're just about out of time. I want to ask you just one final question. What would you say is the number one, we got to keep it to one, Mike, the number one myth about mold?
The number one myth about mold.
That's a myth, that's not true.
That's not true. There's a lot of them. But the number one that's not true is it's just mildew. That's what I would say. It's just mildew. I hear people saying, oh, that's not mold. It's just not mildew. They're just being dismissive over a potential problem.
Yeah.
And mold and mildew are the exact same thing.
Same thing.
We use mildew as a comfortable word.
Oh, okay.
To say, and most people don't know. We've that kind of substituted now and think it's something different. But even around the bathtub, on the caulking, even a little bit on the HVAC registers, your air conditioning vents, it's just a little mildew. All mildew is a smaller colony of mold that hasn't grown to be a big problem in the eyes of the person that's just calling it mildew. But it can lead people to doing the wrong things and making their problem worse.
Sure can. And using bleach. That's one thing I want to throw in there. Do not
use
bleach. So just to kind of, we're out of time right now, but to punctuate what we were just talking about, and the name of our show, All Mold Matters. All mold must go. Mold should not be growing.
Absolutely.
In accumulation inside the home. So thank you for your time. Thanks for coming.
You bet.
I will do this again.
Y'all can check this later and edit this one in for the number one myth about mold, because this one is equally as bad. And that is, if you kill mold, you fix the problem.
No.
Dead mold is just as harmful as living mold. The only advantage is it's not growing and spreading. And spraying it with bleach gives it camouflage, so you think it's gone. But dead mold can be just as harmful, and a lot of people think they've killed it just for it to come back with a vengeance, and they are staying sick. You haven't gotten rid of anything that's making you feel bad. Killing it doesn't make it better.
Yeah, still putting those mycotoxins out there on the spores.
Absolutely.
It's deadly. It's deadly. Thank you so much,
Susan.
again.
It was absolutely a delight. My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on All Mold Matters. And stay tuned for another episode. Be coming out soon.